We talked about the War of the Three Henrys, all the intrigue, eventually Henry IV. What happened to Henry IV, by the way? How'd he die? No, that's Henry II. I know all the Henrys. Where did he get all the Louis? He was assassinated by a rabid.
Oh yeah.
What religion?
Catholic.
Yeah. Yeah, very fanatical Catholic. Thought he was not really Calvin. Remember, he was politique. And so all the intrigue in that, all the intrigue of the British wars, just a pretty amazing time. But here we talked a bit about the combat, the pike squares, the arquebuses, the muskets, the cannon. So we got the Ferdinand. So basically he wants the Catholic representatives to thrown out the window, and they're saved by angels or manure. And Ferdinand's leading the Imperial forces. Frederick will be leading the Protestant forces. And the Protestant forces, well, we got a name for them. Oh, okay, so here we go. So Ferdinand II was a Holy Roman Emperor. So we've talked about, and he had allies with Habsburg Spain. And Habsburg Spain, part of the reason they were allies, we didn't get to this yesterday.
No, we got to the second.
Good. So the Habsburgs had the Habsburg family in Spain, the Habsburg family in Austria. And remember, the Spanish were fighting in Spanish Netherlands. So you have Spanish forces, and right here, that can intervene any time in Protestant areas of what is the Western Empire, now Western Germany, and that Spanish road as a route to get troops they first used 70 years earlier to get troops up to Spanish Netherlands. So the Spanish can fight here. You have Imperial forces more and more focused around Austria. And they're Habsburgs. And so with that, don't forget they're fighting in the Netherlands. And then other Protestants joined in. And indirectly, therefore, they're allied with the Netherlands because the Netherlands are fighting the Spanish. And so that's Ferdinand. Can you see the subdued Habsburg chin?
There's another kind of creepy thing.
And Ferdinand made his decision not just to defeat them, he wanted to crush them and get back the territory or get back the property that the Catholic Church lost when Lutheranism began. Remember, the part of the thing about converting to Protestantism was to take the stuff. And so with that, this will be called the Bohemian Phase. And we have the Habsburg side, which is the Catholic League, and there are all these different principalities. So areas right here, like Saxony or Bavaria, they had to be kind of coerced into joining the Imperial forces. And here's Bohemia right here, and their allies would be places like, where are we at here? Württemberg, Westphalia, that's a castle, we didn't even know these. And there are other Catholic areas helping. Brandenburg jumped on both sides. They would be on the Protestant side, and then neutral, and kind of wishy-washy. And there are Protestant forces outside, like here, Denmark, Sweden. I should add, Poland was very Catholic, still is, and they were fighting Sweden at this time. So you had a kind of a proxy Catholic versus Protestant fight. And don't worry about too many arrows, and these sides will shift all the time. Yeah.
So, I know you just said Sweden, but for the majority of what we've been talking about, are Sweden, Norway, and Finland kind of just doing their own thing?
Yeah. They're very much active in North Sea and Baltic trade. And so there's a few trade wars, and the Hanseatic League would be spread throughout this area. So there are a lot of trading empire. And just at that time, Denmark and Sweden were starting to become a more modern state and really becoming regional powers, especially Sweden. Denmark wanted to be, they just had such a small population. But they're all involved with trade. Well, there's going to be the Bohemians and the Protestant Union. They tried to actually attack Munich and Austria, but they got overextended, and when they retreated, their ill-trained army would have to fight better imperial forces because they had been fighting more battles. Some were fighting against the Dutch, and at the Battle of White Mountain, this huge battle in Bohemia, both sides were evenly matched, but the inexperienced Protestant forces lost. And I love this painting. You can see the squares of pike and mixed in with the arquebuses and infantry. And once the left flank, well, the Protestants had a pretty good position on the hill. It's in the Carpathian Mountains, really pretty area. I've only seen pictures, but the Carpathians are beautiful mountains. It rains there, so they have all the nice weather. But when their left flank began to collapse, they just all ran away. And it was a disastrous defeat, and it really looked like the imperial forces in Ferdinand had won. And it was a relatively minor defeat. It's over, but this is going to have shockwaves because it's going to terrify Protestants all over the Holy Roman Empire. And outside looking in, King Christian and Denmark thought, hey, this is our opportunity. Thus will begin the next phase. What's it at? The Danish Phase. 1625 to 1629. 1625 to 1629. So King Christian of Denmark, he had a very well-trained army, but it was tiny. He paid for a bunch of mercenaries. You know that term, soldiers. A lot of Scots. A lot of soldiers from Scotland who had been fighting in their wars, and then it was real hodgepodge. Some Italians. He even had some. He's fighting for the Protestants. He sees it as his duty to protect the Protestant Union, and also he wanted this land here, what is now northern Germany. And I should add, mercenaries will work for anybody, so he had a number of Catholics in his army. Mercenaries are mercenaries. And they advanced and got way overextended. Way overextended. His army of about 25,000 men couldn't supply. How do you supply? And when that happened, when they got into this area here, don't worry about all the other arrows. This was fighting against the Dutch. This is intrigue between Hungary and Austria. We take care about King Christian. And the Catholic League found a very duplicitous Catholic, but he'll fight for whoever paid him the money, Albrecht von Wallenstein.
That was weird.
That was Richard Nixon. Richard Nixon popped up on my YouTube somehow. And Wallenstein outflanked King Christian and defeated him. And Wallenstein devastated King Christian. In fact, they had to retreat into Denmark, and the Danes are basically out of it. And this happened shockingly fast. Once again, it looks like another big victory for the Catholic League. And this convinced Ferdinand to issue the Edict of Restitution. And the Edict of Restitution, a lot of Catholics, including Wallenstein, said this is crazy. What it said is they're going to arbitrarily start taking back land from Catholics. Now that the Catholic League is basically reconquering Protestant areas. So all those areas of church land that have been taken over by Protestant nobility, they're going to take back. And a lot of the Catholic noblemen are going, you're going to make a lot of enemies. A lot of enemies. And for the next 20 years, he would keep trying to do this Edict of Restitution. And this, more than any other reason, would keep the Protestants in the war. If he wouldn't have done this, the 30 Years' War might have ended right there. And it literally is one of those moments that would have changed the entire course of history. I mean, literally changed everything. By the way, this is a good picture of here are Imperial Musketeers. You see with the musket, they're called matchlights. They got a little bit of armor. By the end of it, all the Imperial forces started wearing white uniforms. Wallenstein got them. That was like a big deal. In the smoky battlefields, he couldn't keep track. The beginnings of uniforms would come out here and then go to the English Civil War. Yeah.
So was Wallenstein who wanted the restitution?
He didn't want. He was furious. Even though he was Catholic, he thought this will anger the Protestants and war will go on.
Okay, so who wanted it?
Ferdinand,
Okay.
the emperor. So with that, and then Catholic princes didn't like Wallenstein. So these are Catholic German princes. Wallenstein had too much power, and he really was pretty duplicitous. And so Ferdinand, the emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, the Habsburg Austrian, he fired Wallenstein, the best Catholic general. There's another good one called the Duke of Tilly. Tilly was a good general, but Wallenstein just had this knack. Wallenstein. And another open door. Angry Protestants, inferior leadership. By the way, I should show you Wallenstein. Albrecht von Wallenstein. Very interesting man. He would be gregarious, be friendly, and then have this volcanic temper. He had an executioner follow him wherever he went, so he could just arbitrarily have enemies executed. And he could not stand the sounds of any animals, especially dogs and cats. So any town he went to, he had his men round up all the dogs and cats and killed them all. Both are horrible. We'll leave it at that. This mercurial man who was looking for personal profit the whole time. And so there's Wallenstein. And thus we begin the Swedish Phase. So the Swedish Phase would be, I didn't put the years down. Maybe I did in the next slide. Oh, I did. Yeah, 1630 to 1635. The Swedish Phase. Well, Sweden had been eyeing this. Seeing their ally Denmark get defeated, the Swedes came up with a great idea. Let's go back and look. By the way, I love those pictures of the squares. I like how they draw the pikes as one just kind of a mob, a line of pikes. So the Swedes had been eyeing this area, Pomerania and Mecklenburg. So this area of Germany. There's no Germany yet. And they wanted it. And so they knew that the bulk of the Imperial forces were down here and here. If they could jet across, take this, start this as a base, he could get land, and then Sweden were Protestants. So then they would help the Protestants. Get land, help the Protestants. And so they got involved. The French, very wary of the growing Habsburg power, both in Spain and Austria, provided them with money. Here's money. They subsidized the effort. Sweden's not a very big country either, but what does money buy you? Mercenaries. But Sweden developed the best army in Europe. Not the biggest, but the best. Well-trained, combined units of pikemen and musketeers. Everybody in the Swedish army had the same type of musket, so they always used the same type of bullets. They standardized artillery. The point is they made the best, most mobile army with really flexible lines to adapt and fight different battles. This shows them as the same old pike squares, and we'll get to this battle in a second, but they were much more flexible. Their leader, King Gustavus Adolphus, a devout Lutheran. So he is fighting this for Lutherans and Protestants, but also he wants land. Brilliant leader. Fought from the front as leaders then had to, because, or else you couldn't give orders. And Adolphus just actually terrified the Catholics. And through a series of maneuvers, they would defeat the Imperial army at the Battle of Breitenfeld. Superior Swedish tactics, rolled up the Austrian line. I thought this contemporary picture was pretty funny because do you have any idea what's going on? Because battles were kind of like that. It was just basically you shoot your muskets and artillery, and then you'd have a push a pike, and you hope one side quit. Or there becomes a standoff here, and you hope your cavalry could sweep around. That was basically the tactics then. The Swedes started developing some pretty good tactics as the war went on. We're not going to talk that much about it, but it's a big victory. The Catholics are on the run. This looks like the Protestants might have a golden opportunity. And there is Gustavus. And I love this picture with the angels playing the trumpet in the background and Gustavus. Yeah, well, if you're going to be a king. But then, Wallenstein was brought back. Ferdinand was like, I need him. I need Wallenstein. And at the Battle of Lutzen, where Wallenstein and Adolphus, the two best generals of the war, in fact, they're starting to be called generals. In fact, you know what the term, the general will be the overall command. The two best commanders. This really confusing battle looked like the Swedes were going to win, but it was foggy. And Adolphus rode into the fog to lead his cavalry against the Imperial flank, and he was mortally wounded. Here is a picture of Adolphus falling off his horse. The Swedes, though, their discipline held. They held the battlefield, and it was basically a tie, but they held the battlefield, so they won. But once Adolphus was dead, now the Swedes are declining. And so this was, the Catholics once again had an upper hand. I shouldn't say the Catholics, more I should say the Empire, the Imperial forces. By the way, I'm not telling you the whole thing. There's fighting in Italy, there's fighting in Poland, there's fighting in the Netherlands, all up and down the Rhine River. This is such a confusing war. By the way, who's suffering?
The peasants.
Yeah, because where do they live? They live off the peasants' land. So, after this, and the Swedes are in decline, time to get rid of Wallenstein. He would be murdered on the behalf of Ferdinand. And so here is, okay, this picture, it kind of makes me laugh, but I guess what are you going to do? They burst into his home, and here he's about to ram a pike through it. And he is just like, hey. I guess when you're in that position, what else are you going to do? I mean, you can't, what are you going to do? How you doing?
Is it me, or does that guy at the door look like he's grinning maniacally?
I know.
He's like he's not even gonna get to do anything because he's third.
He's just so happy he can watch.
Yeah.
And so, but part of the reason Wallenstein was assassinated, he knew Ferdinand didn't like him, so he started negotiating with the Protestants. So let's just say Wallenstein was kind of all over the place. So, do we need another phase? We do need one more battle. At the Battle of Nordlingen, the Swede army, now not the same with Adolphus gone, they would be defeated. And that would not only end the Swedish phase, arguably ending the religious phase. They would be forced to basically sign, the Protestants sign, it's called the Peace of Prague. We don't need to know the name of the treaty. But basically the Protestants admitted they were defeated. I mean, this looked like the Imperial army won. And this is another one about, you see the squares of pikes? The pikemen?
Supposed to be?
It's a mass of about 80 by 80 men, the pikes. The religious war was basically over. But sitting on the sideline is another country, watching this and saying, we're not going to allow the Habsburg to get all this power. What country? France. Thus, the French phase. And this is where we get to the point that the war really is not about religion at all. Because we have the Catholic French supporting the Protestant Germans fight the Austrian and Spanish Catholics. You get the point here? It's just for empire. And this is a really confusing battle. There's still Swedes, there's still Danes. There's massive fighting in Italy. There's huge battles in the Dutch East. Well, now it's Portugal control much of Indonesia, and the Dutch are going to take it. There's fighting in India. There's even fighting in the Americas. Huge battles, or relatively big battles, naval battles in the Pacific, or the Atlantic, in the Caribbean. And so France, at first they aided Sweden with money, but then sent troops. So France is now full in. So this is no longer Catholic versus Protestant. This is the enemies of the Habsburgs against the Habsburgs. And this is purely for empire. And this is international. And the French army is growing very strong. But by far the most destructive phase. Okay, I think I finished. I'm going to finish. I have a little bit left to finish on Monday. Sound good? We got to mention a guy named Richelieu and finish up the war with the Peace of Westphalia.
Is he the cardinal?
Yeah.
3 Musketeers.
Yeah. All righty then. Sorry about the quiz. Gosh darn it, I really did put down Westphalia. I must have. I don't know what else. All right. We will see you tomorrow.